Okay, so what we have here is a Civil War scavenger hunt that's going to go from Antietam to the end of the war with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The kids get a packet that shows them where they're going in the different stations for our Civil War scavenger hunt. The first stop is the Battle of Antietam, where the kids are looking at photographs taken by Matthew Brady, and they're also reading about the battle itself, and they're trying to figure out why the battle happened, the results of the battle, and how it was the bloodiest day in American history. And also the impact photography had on the battle, and how photography impacted the war. From the Battle of Antietam, they look at the Emancipation Proclamation, because it was because of the Battle of Antietam that Abraham Lincoln felt the need to pass the Emancipation Proclamation. And they have to look at the line that is highlighted in red and explain why it was so important that Lincoln said that statement. From Emancipation, we go into July 1863, where the students look at the Battle of Gettysburg. And then they go to the Battle of Vicksburg, Mississippi. And they're looking at how Gettysburg was the turning point of the war, and how Grant's siege at Vicksburg was imperative for dividing the Confederacy. From the Battle of Gettysburg, we look at the Gettysburg Address, where we put it on the wall. The kids have to highlight, and they have to figure out what lines they think are the most important. And then they watch a video from the PBS Ken Burns series, and then they look at why the Gettysburg Address was so important. And we also look at what the Gettysburg Address did to the United States, because it gave the nation a new birth of freedom. And then obviously I have little mini Abe, and I got real Abe right there, just because I'm obsessed. From Gettysburg, we look at the enlistment of African American soldiers, in particular the 54th Regiment, and how African American soldiers had an impact on the war, and how whites responded to the impact of African American soldiers enlisted. Then we get to one of my favorite stations, which is Sherman's March through Georgia. Especially being from Georgia and living in Georgia. The destruction of Atlanta and his destruction through Georgia is very important to us. So the kids are watching a video about Sherman's March from the History Channel. They then look at photographs of Atlanta burned to the ground in 1864 and 1865, and a handful of photographs of Sherman's neckties, the Andersonville prison camp that they came across, and also exactly what Sherman destroyed in his march through Atlanta to Savannah in Georgia in 1865, 1864. As we make our way through the building, we get to 1865, which is the last year of the war. And the kids are looking at Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address, when he says very famously, "With malice toward none and with charity for all," as we examine why that line was so important in Reconstruction of the Civil War. And it was that point John Wilkes Booth did not have a fond liking for Lincoln, and then we get to his assassination later. We walk down the hallway a little bit more, and we get to the passage of the 13th Amendment, where they are examining why that amendment becomes so imperative at the timing, because if you think about it, the amendment was proposed in 1864, and then it was ratified in 65, and it was sent to the states, and it was later approved in late 1865. And so the kids have to try to understand why the 13th Amendment was so imperative, especially after 4 years of fighting. Oh, you can see my really poor replica of Ford's Theater. But before we get to that, Robert E. Lee has to surrender to Ulysses S. Grant, where I tell them the story of how Robert E. Lee met with Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, and how the surrender of Robert E. Lee literally changed the war, because in a war that was marked by such divisiveness, hate, bloodiness, and bitter fighting, it was remarkable to think how Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Wilmer McLean's front parlor, which is kind of cool. From there, we finally get to Ford's Theater. I did the best I can. I'm not very creative or artistic. We get to Ford's Theater, where we look at the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and what John Wilkes Booth's plan was to assassinate the president, and to also do basically to kill off the federal government. And then from there, the kids follow the tracks of the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, where they go back to the classroom and we discuss the assassination, the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, the trial and the hanging of Mary Surratt and the other conspirators.